make sure you ask both sides for written documentation on what the issue is. From the insurer, what exactly is the claim denied or being held for? And from the provider, what correction or resubmission is required? Having that paperwork helps protect the patient from being assigned responsibility over something that they can't really control.
Hello and welcome to the Hi-Fi Health News Podcast. I'm Erika Grotto, and today we're taking a few listener questions with Shawn Stack, a policy director with the Healthcare Financial Management Association. Shawn, first I want to get into limits on insurance. A listener wrote in saying they have X number of treatments for physical therapy. That was the thing that they were dealing with. And once those are up, it's going to cost Y dollars to go for more. Is that something that's common in insurance? And, beyond physical therapy, what other kinds of things might be affected by this type of plan?
Yeah, Erika, physical therapy is one of the more common services that employers or insurance plan design limits for consumers. Many insurances and some Medicaid, Medicare Advantage plans cap physical therapy visits, usually to around 20 visits per year. Other services, Erika, that could often be limited based on plan design with insurance are things like occupational therapy, speech therapy, chiropractic services, behavioral health therapy. A little bit less common now, but some plans still cap sessions or require reauthorization for behavioral health therapy. And also durable medical equipment, caps on quantity per year, depending on the equipment that the consumer is asking for. So these limits are usually written into the summary of benefits of coverage or the full plan document where for the insurance benefits booklet that the consumer gets. But yeah, those are great questions, and those are some of the areas that are typically limited, that consumers could see limited.
So if you are looking at some course of treatment, like we're talking about, what kinds of questions should you be asking before you even start?
How many visits per year are covered for a specific medical procedure, item, or service? That's something that you can ask either of them. You can ask that with your provider, or you can ask that with your insurer. Does your deductible or copay apply to each visit? And that'll give you an idea of how much out-of-pocket cost you'll have. What happens if I need more visits than the plan covers? And can my provider request an exception if the service or the item is medically necessary? And of course, Erika, typical questions like, is there a prior authorization required before I start the treatment? And are there in-network versus out-of-network differences in those limits for that specific service? So those are all some helpful questions that you can ask your provider that you're scheduling with or your insurance to give you an idea of out-of-pocket cost and what those limits are.
So let's say I've reached my limit, whether I got an extension or not. I've now reached the limit, but I still need more, and it's going to cost me however much it's going to cost me. Are there resources available for me? Is there anything a patient can do besides deciding to pay it out of pocket or just not do it?
Yeah, there really is, Erika. You can request a medical necessity exception. You can have your doctor submit documentation asking the insurance company to approve additional visits based on your specific medical needs. And those can get approved based on your comorbidities and your medical needs for that specific service, whatever it is. You can also appeal a denial. If an insurer denies the provider schedule that service for you, you can appeal that denial if additional visits are denied, and patients can appeal those through their plan's grievance appeal processes. You can also ask about alternative coverage. Sometimes additional visits can be authorized under a very specific diagnosis code, and pointing that out to the insurer that you have that issue can many times get that service approved. For your earlier example, physical therapy, that might be approved through rehabilitation under your plan's design or habilitation under your plan's design. And then lastly, and certainly not least, Erika, if the insurance refuses to cover it after all those items are done, you may be able to negotiate a lower cash rate with that provider, making that out-of-pocket cost affordable to continue that therapy.
Another listener reached out and asked about what you do when you're stuck between your insurer and your provider. And I think a lot of us have gone through this kind of thing where your insurance company is telling you one thing about what should be paid for or what should happen. Your provider is saying something else. And they seem to not be talking to each other. They'll only talk to you, and it's, you're calling one person and calling the other. And as a patient, it's really hard to resolve these things on your own. I've heard a lot of stories about this, and it's so frustrating. Why does this happen? Why do patients end up getting stuck in the middle?
This is a very common scenario, and I have personally been involved in many of these error negotiations or error conversations. Typically in this situation, there's some kind of claim error or mismatch. The provider may have submitted the claim with missing info or unclear coding, or maybe even incorrect patient information. And then the insurance rejects it, saying we can't pay until the provider fixes it. It's a system silo, right? So the insurer and providers often don't communicate directly. They do so through interface exchanges. Their systems don't talk well to each other, and this causes delays and breakdowns in resolving those errors. And instead of sometimes defaulting to saying, tell your provider or your insurer to fix it, balancing out responsibility back onto the patient. And providers want to make sure they're reimbursed, and then, of course, payers want to avoid overpayment or paying on an incorrect claim. So this does come up, believe it or not, quite a bit. And typically, Erika, what a patient can do, and unfortunately there's no magic bullet, but I can provide you with some of those optional steps to try to reduce that frustration and move that along. Make sure you ask both sides for written documentation on what the issue is. From the insurer, what exactly is the claim denied or being held for? And from the provider, what correction or resubmission is required? Having that paperwork helps protect the patient from being assigned responsibility over something that they can't really control. And then use the provider's billing office. Insurers often won't talk to patients about claim coding, but they will talk to the provider's billing office. So ask to escalate with the provider's revenue cycle or patient accounts team. Ask that to be escalated on that issue. So they're pushed to resubmit or appeal that denial or that rejection. And then also you could file an appeal with the insurer as the patient. Even if the provider hasn't fixed the claim yet, you as the patient can file a member appeal. That forces the insurer to issue a formal response in writing, which can pressure both sides to act. And then you can also ask about patient advocacy. Many insurers have a member advocate or a case manager role. Their job is to help untangle payer-provider disputes. And if nothing else, and you hit a wall, you can file a complaint with your state insurance department regulator that takes balance billing and improper claim handling seriously. I've been really instrumental in facilitating a lot of those complaints with state insurance departments, and they typically get back when the patient's being balance billed inappropriately.
What if you are getting bills in the meantime? You know that you should be covering part of it. You want to pay your portion of it, but you don't really have a clear picture of what it is that you should be paying. Should you just not pay? I think you're going to tell me not to pay the whole thing, but what should you do in that case where you really want this off of the books for you, but not at your financial detriment, and making sure that everything happens properly on the insurance side?
Well, very unfortunately, it's not off the books until the claim's been resolved, right? So I think going back to asking for everything in writing and saying that the provider and the payer are following up to escalate the issue and resolve the issue is really important. If you are someone like me who understands their coinsurance or copays, especially if it's a copay or a deductible amount, you know what that set amount is. I would say, sure, go ahead and feel comfortable if it's a set amount and you know it's a set amount. You could go ahead and pay that. But definitely keep your documentation, knowing that it's up to the payer and up to the provider to resolve the issues that they're having with their disputes internally.
All right. Well, thank you so much for helping us through these murky situations. They don't come up for everyone, but I think they do come up for a lot of folks. So, Shawn Stack, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Erika.
That's it for us today. I'm Erika Grotto for Hi-Fi Health News. Thanks for watching.